Good afternoon, dear colleagues. The Ukrainian Crisis Media Center continues its work. Now we are going to talk about fake communities, and we will clarify whether it's a threat to Ukraine's national security. We will talk about it with Ihor Huskov, colleague of the Security Service of Ukraine, Central Administration, Anatolii Tkachuk, Civil Society Institute, Roksolana Barchuk, the Chief head of the Department of the Administrative and Territorial Order of the Ministry of Regional Development, and Katerina Brovko, Chief Expert of the Department of Applications of the Department of State Registration and Notariate of the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine. On the Skype communication, we have Roksolana Barchuk, who is executive staff of the Kosiv Regional Council, and also Ihor Ahibalov, director of the Local Government Development Center in Luhansk region. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for coming to us. The word fake generally happens rather often in our discourse, but it primarily concerned information of fake humanitarian convoy or something like that, and now we are talking about general fake formations. And it's a new phenomenon. Dear Anatolii, since you deal with decentralization, you were the first to come across this problem. Please tell us about this phenomenon. Good morning, dear colleagues. It happened so that I deal with decentralization issues I've been dealing with it for many years, and I saw that viruses appearing in Ukraine aimed at ruining Ukrainian communities at the very bottom, local places, and depending on the territory, all these viruses have their own specificities and their own attributes. When we look closely, we can see that all of them are aimed at one direction: to ruin Ukraine as a state, and generally to introduce corrosion to the Ukrainian society, to make everyone fight with everyone. If we look back at the history, then since 1990, like everyone in the Soviet Union, Ukraine had a strict matrix with vertical lines, a vertical along the party line, a vertical of the executive committee along the executive committee line. Everything was clear. As soon as an order appeared in Moscow, it should have been fulfilled on the whole territory of Ukraine. After collapse of the Soviet Union, the majority of independent republics, apart from maybe Baltic countries, a new matrix was formed similar to the one existing before the independence, where we have a strict presidential vertical. Since the council vertical was ruined according to the law, a new system of subordination along the ruling party was been forming that was equal leveled to the presidential party. It was quite comfortable to come back to under the Kremlin subordination at any moment, because there this matrix acquired the most classical form. Several times Ukraine tried to destroy, to hesitate this matrix, to come out of it, to build its own democratic model where everyone has its own authorities, no overlapping authorities, no doubling, but there's responsibility for the future of the state. It was in 2005, 04, 08, when it seemed that everything was ready for decentralization, but nothing happened, because in 2010, 2011, the Kremlin matrix over was introduced into Ukraine fully, and starting from 2014 we began a serious decentralization. If we look at what was happening during the first 2 years of the processes, we see that Ukraine has created classical municipalities. Then this is the community, the united community, and the budget decentralization was even deeper than in many countries of the world. Ukraine is going out of this matrix, and at this moment viruses activated that had been introduced into Ukraine even earlier. The most active virus is a federalization virus that was very strictly introduced during the hot phase of the war, and it seems like everyone forgot about it, but the creators of this virus didn't forget about it. Please look at this map. Here you can see a rather strange belt of the regions: Odessa, Kirovograd, Poltava, Kyiv, Khmelnytsk, Zhytomyr, Transcarpathian region. It wasn't drawn. All these regions offered an initiative. They adopted an address to the president, to the ministers, to the parliament to transfer to negotiating relations concerning distribution of authorities between the region and the regions and the oblasts. And everything started with trivial things like, if you can remember, regional and city councils started to acknowledge Russia as aggressor. And there was a euphoria that somebody who didn't recognize Russia as an aggressor will or would recognize it. And those who took a decision outside of their competences weren't punished at all. The second virus, the so-called registers of the territorial local community. The basic idea is using virus technology to prove people that all executive bodies in Ukraine are not legal, that not legitimate, that all acts issued by the bodies of Ukraine are not legitimate. These people are playing on people weaknesses. There's a certain territory, a village, a council, where the local people explored the resources of titanium ores. People come and say there'll be death to you, because as soon as they start to extract titanium, then you will have cancer, all the diseases. It won't be legal because everything belongs to our community. And for this purpose, we should create a community registrate. On maybe another case, there's the issue of a forest and pollution of the rivers, and all these people who are bringing an idea of a people's territory community start to persuade people. You will unite and please announce yourselves as a local community. All the supreme power belongs to you and you will be happy. And in this way, parallel structures of the authorities are being created, because at first everyone makes laugh. How can it happen? Then a meeting was convocated and created a territorial community. Then they adopted a statute, and then they wrote that decisions of the authorities are not could not be legitimate if they were not adopted by the local authorities. Then these bodies start to issue a certificate about registration over some people's enterprise that doesn't pay taxes. Then they start issuing a birth certificate or a passport of a human being, saying you don't have to pay taxes to go to the Ukrainian army, and everybody owes to you and you do not owe to anyone. This is spreading across Ukraine very strongly. I won't focus on many things, but I'd like to draw your attention to some things. There is an instruction. You can see it in the internet. The most of the instructions say how to form this territorial instruction. This instruction was modernized after some pseudo communities that were not registered were boards of the Ministry of Justice, and they say it's not obligatory for us to register a statute of a local community and to create it as a legal entity of public rights, of public law. At first they said that it should be registered as a legal entity of a public law. And then when they didn't succeed, they said that let's make a public legal entity of without a legal right. Then they say that the registration of the territorial community in a regional board of the Ministry of Justice as a legal entity is not obligatory, since in the new QED, local executive bodies don't exist as a class. Then we can see a manual of a people's entrepreneur who confirms that we are people's entrepreneurs in another world, and there's a certificate of a people's entrepreneur. So you see that the territorial activity is another world, and a legal substantiation is formed under it, why you can be an entrepreneur and you don't have to pay taxes. Now there's an interesting story. After restricting some Russian resources, since most Russian resources of the fake communities were served by Russian platforms, and the most information is closed to an ordinary user, but many of them can have access. And you can see many ideas that after people's entrepreneur, there's another idea to create people's judges, to create systems of physical protection of territorial communities, quasi-military structures, the formation of structures during the time X who can fight against Ukraine like it was some time ago, and for this purpose a people's entrepreneur is being created, because once you started to make business, you don't pay taxes, so you will have fines, you will have administrative responsibility, which in some period of time is transferred to criminal responsibility. Everything is published by officials who are responsible for that, or pseudo officials who will say either you have to storm the parliament or the administration, otherwise the information that you are under criminal responsibility will go to Ukrainian punishing body. And you see the license plates several times. I saw cars with these license plates. In Chernigov, you can get a human being passport for 600 hryvnias. Everything starts with a game like this, but it's very serious. And the saddest thing is that when we react, when we have to emissaries who come to a village and start to hesitate the situation, in some time 10 or 20 people will stick to them, who will think that those people are telling the truth, and we will have to work not with two people, but with 20, and the day after tomorrow with 20,000. It cannot be stopped, and it was in Donbass. Thank you, Anatolii Fedorovich. Let's now see how it happens in practice. Dear Roksolana, please tell us. Anatolii explained the concept behind these fake territorial communities. When you saw this phenomenon in Kosiv district, please tell us the story. Can you hear me? In Kosiv district, everything started with the virus mentioned by Anatolii Fedorovich. And we have a virus of registration of local communities. Everything started with very simple things. There were civil activists who decided that something should be changed in the state, and changes should begin with changes in our community. These issues were very important of the local status, the underground resources issues, about road repair, and actually under this mask a structure was formed the Communities Committee. This matter attracted deputies of the district council under the source of road repair. And they had various meetings. And then they started to collect signatures to create this committee. But in every committee there should be a responsible representative, a representative from the local authorities. But when it was 2014-2015, it was rotating faster and faster. And we even had an item that was registered, and was registered by the Ministry of Justice body. When the local authority looked through it, they were shocked. Can you please talk a little bit slower? The statute is the basic legislative and standard act of the territorial community, and it has the highest legal force as compared to other acts. The subject of this statute is the basic aspects of the local subordination at the specified territory. The territorial community is a legal authority or entity of public law. The territorial community at any time can terminate a decision of the general meeting and to stop authorities of local self-government bodies if they violate the constitution, the human rights, etc. We had very interesting moments about property and budget issues. The statute said the territorial community can have a right to solve issues of the local significance. It is the subject of communal property, and it uses and manages this property. The territorial community is composed with people who permanently live on the territory. Members of territorial community is a person having a real estate and permanently living on this territory. We saw two drafts of the statutes where they completely ignored the legislation of Ukraine. And they didn't interpret right even the constitution of Ukraine, that we proposed their own interpretation. And everything was so confused that we understood that we had to make a training for local self-government chiefs, because it was very threatening. And we prepared an information workshop explaining people about the statute of a territorial community, why it is needed and how it is formed. And we had a vivid discussion because civil activists understood that somebody was following them. And we had a strict discussion on a local paper. And there were manipulations about the comments of the civil code. We tried to explain the rights and to persuade people. When somebody comes from an executive body, and everything looks very differently. They work on information about information materials in a local paper. In our case, the story ended successfully because our local security service and the oblast administration worked in a good coordination. And we instituted a criminal proceeding aiming at violent capturing of the state authority, and our story had a continuation in this case. 2 statutes were approved by the community, and they were registered by the state administration. And another 15 statutes were discussed in other areas, residential areas. Can you hear me, dear Roksolana? What is the community whose statute was registered? Because we had a representative from the Ministry of Justice. Judivantopchatev village. We worked with the justice bodies. We also had clarifications of people who did the registration, and we had the situation. You remembered, you mentioned the civil activists who coordinated this process. Who are these people? Are they local people or where they come from? These are local people, representatives of local civil organizations. I don't want to name their names because an investigation is underway. The founders of all the situation were local activists who, on the wave of the revolution, wanted to change something, to do something, but everyone had his own recipe. They appeared aggressive as to the platform of self-government. Fundings of a residential area had to be used, and they said one thing to people, and they collected passport data, wanting to prove that a person is a representative of this community. Thank you, dear Roksolana, for sharing with us the matters in Kosiv district. Is this experience discussed somewhere in the accumulated form? Did you succeed? Did the district succeed to solve this problem? Yes, of course, you can have access to the information materials in the letter that we prepared. And it explains about the Institute of the Territorial Community. We have the district council website, and this information appeared in the information space of the Transcarpathian region. And it's pleasant that with common efforts we tried to bring this information to people, and we have succeeded in it. Because we made representatives of local government bodies Thank you, dear Roksolana, and we'll come back to the discussion to the present. Igor Ivanovich, Roksolana mentioned the security service of Ukraine, about that Kosiv district succeeded in solving this problem, about the scale of this, the scope of this problem, how large scale this problem is, and what are the measures to solve this problem. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleague, Anatolii Fedorovich, for a very informative material, very concise and analytical, which was very analytical and demonstrative, showing showing the problems in the legal space and how it is accumulated now and how it is being supplemented and used. I'd like to draw attention to some key points, maybe to supplement somewhere, and then to say, as the word security, as people react to the word security, and what is the problem? First of all, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that the sources of this virus are not in Ukraine. They are artificially created by special services of the Russian Federation. We are the field to plant these seeds and to use them to harm our people and our country. Today we can confirm, and we are ready to transfer relevant materials to journalists, and we cooperate for cooperation, we hope for cooperation in this respect. Citizens of the Russian Federation created some pseudo-information which spreads these seeds, and also it accumulates Russian foundations starting to assign money, and we can say that 2011 Kharkiv, the first declaration about on people's independence and people's sovereignty, and the participants of this closed speech in Kharkiv were people who became leaders of the first pseudo communities, and among them was a citizen of Ukraine who was one of the organizers of the Russian Nationalist Party, KOPKP, who was at the sources of spreading this ideology. From the point of view, we'll come back to our roots, where people themselves decided how to live. Then they had a strict anti-Western position. Today, this virus started to develop very actively, and it has been developing since 2012 in the form of information messages, and there are three directions, and we can see very strictly them. They don't overlap, and they don't interfere with one another. They cover people ready to perceive a relevant ideology. This is one candy. I don't want to call it a candy. The first mentioned by my colleagues, the so-called territorial communities or public law, they really registered as civil society organizations, and they have their own civil society leader. This is the first direction, according to the legitimacy attribute, that an implication to the legitimacy of legal documents, the legal space, etc. The second direction, this is a pseudo-territorial community, and they even pay to get registered. They have their own leader, a woman living in Khmelnytsky city, where they had the main ideological source. They say, you won't need any registration. We'll remember 100 years ago, 1917, where they said that they would take away all the property, and they would distribute all the property among the community. The next third direction is a Cossack direction. Legal justice bodies registered Cossack communities, about 200 of them, and the leader of this thing is one of the participants of the Russian project 2012-2014, which is more common as the International Confederation of the Russian People, the Kremlin stage, everything, the Moscow stage. It covers all the things. Every of them Each of them attracts supporters who are either open to capturing some benefits, locating at a local administrative territorial unit, or maybe to wrap their approaches into legal substantiation, or somebody uses Cossackship as heritage of our ancestors. They don't overlap. Those are three directions of their work. Then secondly, I would like to draw attention that today creation and functioning of these pseudo-territorial communities attracts patriots, absolutely normal patriots. I will give you Chernovtsi as an example about popularization. A person who tried to actively create them filmed such plots, even if they can be hardly named as plots, and they arouse a surprise, and they send them. We create our territorial community and we'll take our 10 or 15,000 euros everyone. This is one of the components. The second example. A territorial community is created in Luhansk region. Then the creator goes to the Donetsk region. We remember the spring 2014, the announcement of the so-called DPR. Then this person goes to the Ternopil region and creates a pseudo-territorial community, then goes to Odessa region, also creating pseudo-territorial community. And he dedicates his free time to sign proposals of the LPR constitution. We understand that all his or her movements arouse a range of issues. Can our service see that? We do not simply see it. We unrolled this active work using not only those law-protecting resources, but we are working very closely with civil society activists, with the mass media. We instituted 26 criminal proceedings across whole Ukraine's territory, Article 9956, and what was mentioned by a representative from Ivano-Frankovsk region, making a very close analysis of the information space or field. You can see our work on every territory of our state. I would like to thank the journalists, the security service, in cooperation with journalists, has recently prepared a film where this lasts 30 minutes, and this film now is shown in every district in Ukraine. It shows the threat of pseudo-territorial communities and how they try to block united decisions of the administrative and territorial communities, and how this methodology of network marketing, how this mechanism is used. And its mechanisms, the argumentation, the wrapping. This film is prepared, and now we use very actively, it is used very actively in education work. But we see another threat. We can see that currently one of the political and civil forces, actually we have several leaders. I mentioned three directions, each of them having its own leader, with whom we associate creation of specific pseudo-territorial communities. There's a force coming from the above. I wouldn't say this is a force of power. Or maybe people who wish to go to the bottom from the top. And currently sources of this movement are being formed with the effort of participants of the territorial communities. And they say, we are going from the top to the bottom, and you are going from the bottom to the top. We will have to unite. Now they raise issues about referendums to oppose the existing authority. Journalists, you can make your own journalist investigations, creating materials about who initiated the creation of pseudo-territorial communities in 2007 and 2011, and who is currently the leader of this civil society and political structure. And there you will see ties with the Russian Federation and with other structures on its territory. You can see everything with your own eyes. Unfortunately, we have such a threat, but I emphasize, and I'm ending with what I started. Currently, our opponents, our enemies, strictly use three key moments. The first is the rule of law. This is a free interpretation of Article 5 of the Constitution and all of the rest of the constitutions. The Institute of Democracy. Currently, Ivano-Frankivsk, Khmelnytsk, Ternopil, Kharkiv, Odessa, where the word security blocks their consciousness. Some specific civil society and political structures coming there and persuading people that the security service tries to damage democracy, that everyone has a right to express his or her will. This is the second key point used by the Russian Federation, the democracy principle and corruption. The third key point, corruption. And they base their work, the Russian Federation Special Services base their work on these key points. Thank you, Ihor Ivanovich. And about these three key points, is there any geography of their spreading? And you know, it's so interesting to demonstrate these things and to see. You see, the technology was absolutely simple. In 2013, they created even not social media, but a website. I won't announce that it is blocked. Ukraine's map has such signs about where this pseudo-territorial community is created, and gives contact details of the leaders. We are grateful to the leaders of pseudo-territorial communities for creating such maps, because at the first stage they facilitate our job to study who was who. Then these people also created a second website calling the Legal Laboratory, where it explained how to create a pseudo-territorial, a fake community, where letters go to the president, to the parliament, to the leaders of all local self-government bodies, SPU, police, militia, 2012, 2013. Similarly, along the second line, they had the same website. For example, a territorial community of public law, and another website calling Legal Laboratory. A principal difference, this is the first signal where they try to create such communities. Firstly, when they talk about unregistered communities whose leaders reject the necessity of the registration. And it's enough to collect 3 people to choose a representative and to announce local self-government bodies about their existence. And we have interesting letters where they write, "Thank you, dear state, for undertaking all responsibilities on protecting our underground resources, but we don't need your services any longer. If you try to prevent us from doing our matters, our things, we will try to institute proceedings about genocide of the Ukrainian people." Secondly, territorial communities of the public law, where they have an application of some legal grounds for their creation. The imitator meeting, a village having 5,000 people, and supporters of this territorial community gather in one of the buildings, and each of them is holding a table and will be ready to transfer such photos to journalists. These tables say, "I represent 20 people of this village, and I represent 50, and I represent 150." And the leader says that it's enough to collect 50% plus one voice, and then they can talk about statute of a territorial community. and so on and so forth. And then the third Cossack direction, they are registered, and then using the symbols of great princes, and they say this is a real state flag. And but I want to emphasize that these people who are leading these movements, pseudo-territorial communities that don't register, Cossack territorial communities, directly took part in several projects of the Russian special services existing in 2011-2012. As a representative of the State Security Service, I am responsible for these words. This is official information. Ihor Ivanovich, you mentioned Ordilo. Is there a similarity in the algorithm creating of DPR and LPR and the formation of these fake communities? Can we talk about some parallels? Anatolii Fedorovich also mentioned that the mutations took place there in the project. Where is the main threat of the... No, not like this. The federalization of pseudo-people republic, and when to the part of the federalization where they exhausted their efforts, we talk about the thing that Ukraine's territory, maybe it's my subjective opinion, nobody has illusions that the DPR or the LPR or Kharkiv Republic or etc. can be wanted in the composition of the Russian Federation. They don't need us as a state. Let's say about the village of Katsapetovka, village of X, who has an opportunity to block decision making at the central level. Ukraine's budget. Well, how much money do you stipulate to us? We won't adopt this budget. We won't vote for it. And there's a chaos and blockage as a result. Then another example of pseudo-federalization. When they failed to do it with the People's Republic, then they started to make some projects about special environment, economic, language, special status. I will give you, as an example, a project in social Zaporozhye. Environmental status. Everyone visited Zaporozhye and everyone knows about a complex environmental situation, many enterprises and so on and so forth. And of course the supreme authorities have to think about these issues, but what these people do? Under the aegis of the protection of Zaporozhye ecology, we must make our own examinations Zaporozhye about every project taken by the Verkhovna Rada. There's a mechanism as there's a mobilization. Then the mobilization covers the whole Ukraine. The initiators of this project say Zaporozhye won't participate in this mobilization because when we call and attract administrative and communal enterprises, then our ecology will get worse. And then another example how blockage happened of this the mobilization in the West Ukraine via pseudo-territorial communities. You can see this instruction on their website, on their social media. And they have great difficulties in distributing this virus, but the grounds were the following. If you have a representative of the Ministry of Defense coming to you, you take a letter from the minister which wants to convocate your son, and you say there's no concept of the Ministry of the Defense as a legal entity. Now we see private companies. We are ready to give you legal assistance to support your rights where your son is going to be convocated. The mass media had information about the participation of the fake communities, about the shelling of the representatives of the Polish consulate in Luhansk. Do you have information confirming that the participation of the fake communities. I wouldn't like to comment on this answer because my specificity, my competence doesn't give me a right to participate in the investigation of this crime. I will say that, yes, the security service and the police force cooperate so closely. We will learn about the results very soon. Every crime has absolutely specific persons. And in conclusion, I would like to address all the residents of our country. We need to think a little bit about when a new idea, a good idea appears. We tried to understand in the information field, is there a community created in the Russian Federation? Yes, really, they registered a territorial community. And what they do, they install benches in the yards, they install children playgrounds. And this territorial community, like in Ukraine, isn't created in the Russian Federation. Though our leaders of these fake communities are fond of visiting the Russian Federation, and they have visited it more than once during the last 3 years.
And tell us, please, how this issue is connected with decentralization. And we know that many people, activists, patriots, they have good intentions, but they take part in this action. And even when people were invited from the regions, there was fake territorial community, and the person thought that this is about decentralization. And maybe people will understand better after this press conference this issue. So how to communicate the right ways of decentralization in order that people did not get in such organizations. I support my colleague. If someone brings you something in a present box and say that you can solve different issues in simple ways, you should think twice where you go, because any process in the state, such as Ukraine, it goes along the rules that are in our state. Democracy is the adherence to the rights and procedures and obligations, and governmental bodies, the officials, they get responsibilities in the framework of law. Elections are taken, and the local government is established, and the law envisages the responsibility of the local government at local level. About financial decentralization, that was in 2014-2015. At the basic level, they brought a lot of resources, and my colleague will also support this, that the local level was underfinanced, and the responsibilities were provided, and the discussion was how to organize these communities. And now we try to form these powerful communities. And in this process, we see the emergence of some people who make ideological shifts, and they are not the part of decentralization. In this case, decentralization goes along two ways. This is sectoral, when different bodies of power provide their responsibilities to relative structures that act locally, and decentralization in the reorganization of at the local level, and 1,900 local councils joined, and the precondition of this was that some settlements, because of urbanization, just ceased to exist. And local councils, their number increased. And the unification of communities, we had 11,000 local councils at local level, and the structure was inefficient, and there were no people, and the law on voluntary unification of communities, and it envisages that efficient community is that the community that has financial and personnel resources in the framework of their responsibility. That's why public body cannot be formed due to private initiative of some people. In the law, it is said that if you want to deal with the issues at local level, you should provide deputies, you take part in the initiatives, you form NGOs and at local level, and you propose to the council to introduce initiatives through your local deputies concerning improvement or implementation of some local projects. And it's in the condition of Russian aggression, you know, that there are procedures established. And our experts were invited to some roundtables, and it was said that nothing can be done. And they asked whether you nominated, did you propose anything to the council? They said no, so they just waited for proposals. Deputies work, and city heads, they also work, and they do not have proper communication among themselves, and they should participate, and the deputies should participate in this. And in Europe, one of the first aspects, if someone comes to community and proposes something, first there is a survey of population, and then they take a decision. A relative body takes decisions, and these bodies are created. And in Ukraine, if the body has proper responsibilities, they can take these decisions at local level. So we are speaking about procedures, and in the majority of cases, people just don't know these procedures. So if, for example, there is some information provided to the local administrations, to the local governments, to the centers of development of local governance, in order to provide better understanding. Sometimes local council, village councils, they adopt the statute, and they believe that this is the statute for their community, and this is incompetent. And they do not understand this process. So maybe the information should be provided at a local level. I won't popularize one project. You lead the project, and some European resources were provided through this project, and I invite everyone to address. There is offices of support of reforms in different regions, and my colleague will support in this. So there is, if you have some questions about functioning, about responsibilities, creation in the regional centers, we have proper structures, and there is training. They provide refresher training, they share the experience, they provide information campaigns, and also we can explain in what way it can be done. We have information, we have correct information that can be provided, but unfortunately at the moment we cannot oppose this wave of information noise that is that covers this topic. And if, for example, the ministry provided the letter with the information, yes, there is such an issue. Our specialists, they provide explanations and send them to the regional administrations. We can explain to them how it happens, and also we provide explanations where they can find information and how it should be done. And about fake communities, maybe there are some explanations about fake communities to the people. I didn't write such information, so maybe we can expect to have these letters with explanations about fake communities. I would like to say that the influence from outside is really strong and versatile, and it will constantly change. And throughout the years, we saw how this ideology of fake territorial communities, how it changed in time. And we can provide one explanation, but we cannot wait for another technology, so it should be a continuous process. I look through the sites, and there are some instructions, and they just shift the information, and we provided information that this is against constitution, and then new ideology appeared that this corresponds to the Declaration of Sovereignty of Ukraine, and they adhere to this document, or they say that this is in the framework of declarations and memorandum at the international level, and they also say about European Charter. But in the European Charter, there is no such reference, and also they add journalist view that stimulate these processes, and these are not only Ukrainian problems. Recently, I heard one man from the United States who is an expert, and he said that this is a technology. They provide information that invokes fear in people, and they say that, for example, the airplane fell, and they try to find other case of air catastrophe, and they compare these events. And if you compare the number of events and the number of these catastrophes is on the decrease, actually. So there is such a problem in one territory, and in 50 territories they solved these problems, but they didn't solve a problem in one community, but they provide information about this problematic community. And also we have a problem with qualification in the bodies of justice and in the courts. I saw decision of the courts, and they and we do not know how the Justice Department can register a legal person. That is called a local government body that was created by private people. And in one community, Beloberiska community of Frankivsk Oblast, Ustariki village, a lot of materials in the media that this village had a riot, and the decision of unification is present, but people do not want it, and they do not get budget funds. And in times it happened that in this village of Stariki there is a fake community, and in the media they just do not see that there is fake community in this village. And the head of the Susterik village is not with us today, but we will also invite him for participation in the next briefing. And also the Roksolana told us about registration of the statute, and there are some instances when they register those fake communities as local government bodies. For example, there is a village council of Mogileva, and there is fake community registered territorial community of Mogileva-Podilsk. So there is two parallel structures, and there are tons of such cases. What does the ministry plan to do with this? Thank you for this press conference, and thank you for highlighting this problem. And the Ministry of Justice is not the subject of the registration of these fake entities. I cannot even say that these are legal persons. State registration of these legal persons is not covered by legislation. This is first. Second, we have the definition what territorial community means. These are, first of all, physical people, persons who live in some territory. And state registration of a legal person, as public law provides, it cannot happen. And what we can do and we should provide information, we should provide explanation to main territorial departments of justice, and we should highlight this problem. And we should take part in court hearings. We should pay attention to this, because the courts reject the stopping of the activity of these legal persons.
Тут теж, очевидно, є такий вакуум.
So there is a vacuum in information. So some state registers, they maybe got confused, and they should know legislation properly. Can we expect such a letter with explanation from your the body you work in? So thank you, Katerina, and we have a Skype connection with from Luhansk sector of the development of local government development center. Do you hear us well? Yes, I hear you. Thank you for being with us. So we spoke about the situation on the whole in the country, and in Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast included. Tell us about the situation concerning this issue in Luhansk Oblast. And I have a document in my hands now. Velika Chernigavka village of Luhansk Oblast, and they addressed the Supreme Council concerning this issue, that they should register this territorial community as a legal person. And is this a big problem in Luhansk Oblast? Good afternoon. It's very pleasant to be here with you and see this people. Thank you for this initiative in Luhansk Oblast. I would like to say two things. First, in Luhansk Oblast, this problem was common because we were a territory for more rigid project such as LPR. They tried to disseminate here. I support the words of the representative of SBU that now there is shift possible because LPR failed. Now some people try to introduce a virus of so-called communities that are outside legal field. As of today, I know about two cases the ones one you've mentioned, and one more settlement. I won't name it because the documents were provided to proper authorities, and now investigation is ongoing. Despite this, I believe that in our territory we have many risks. So this rigid project failed, and now some political forces of neighboring countries, they can have milder scenario. Why they failed before? Because from the first trainings that we had with Anatolii Fedorovich at the level of the Office of Reforms that existed before, we knew about it, and all of my colleagues, they dealt with this problem, and we hold meetings with population, and I always bring a lawyer with me in such meetings, and we discuss these issues with the people. And maybe that's why we prevent these problems, because this variant, this scenario was expected, so we were ready for this. And I agree with the proposal that we should, the letter with explanation should be provided to local administrations, and we have cooperation with local administration, and we voiced these issues, and they are ready for to counteract it. And also maybe a round table should be held concerning this problem. And now we see the situation that in the framework of this law, some communities are united, but some rules are violated, and there are 2-3 village councils, and they get united, and this is not good. And here, I believe there is some ground for fake communities. And if they are not able to register it according to the law, there will be some people who just will use this scenario that was voiced and present on the sites of our neighbor. So we should think about this problem, and we should provide proper explanation to people. And as territorial unit of the Local Government Development Center, we will provide proper support. We have a lawyer in order to help us to resolve these issues. And we should share the experience throughout the country. Thank you very much for your work and for your active position and your optimism. And thank you for being with us today by Skype. And now we are back at the press briefing center. Do you have questions? Alexander Machav, Ukraine TV channel, Luhansk Oblast, you have connection with them still. Please mention second settlement, because we are speaking about transparency, and we should involve in this activity. Can you mention the Belogorovka-Popasnensky region? Thank you. And a question to SBU representative.
You said that there were 26 criminal proceedings. Was there at least one sentence? And how many people were arrested? And were there people arrested at all? and the idea of the three leaders you are mentioning. Can you name these names? Can you enumerate these names? Criminal proceedings are open in every region, and they are at various stage. Currently, we are having a pre-trial investigation. Searches are being held, and every region has its own criminal proceeding. You can see the information on the website of the security service, and you can use specific information. A resolution of on arrest is taken by court, not the security service. Courts selected other measures. Actually, every specific case had specific suspects and specific names and people to whom they are under the investigation. But you can get more specific information on every region on the website of the SBU about the leaders. First of all, I would say fake communities who position themselves as persons that do not need registration. Mostly the methodological work on their formation, forming the methodology of the opposing to the law protecting bodies, law enforcement bodies, via workshops, seminars. The leader is Olga, a resident of the Khmelnytsky city, and then the fake communities about public law. You understand that their legal dialogues and popularization is associated with Roksolana, and about Cossack communities. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name now, but he is one of the leaders of the Russian movement, Motokan, who was at the very roots of creating the coordinating centers, actually, in December 2013, January 2014, in the so-called DPR, LPR, and during the events in Kharkiv. I don't remember the name right away, but the communities are called Cossack territorial communities. And who is located, which of them are located in Ukraine? But we are talking about the territory of Ukraine. So they are all on the territory of Ukraine. Yes, of course, they are subjects of criminal proceedings. So these 26 criminal cases, and 3 of them, are they under proceedings, and what's the status, the progress? Are they arrested? Is someone of them arrested? It seems to me I have given an answer to your question that every region has a specific suspect. Of course, they are specific people. Of course, the number of these people is more than 3 people. You can familiarize yourself with this information on the website of the security service, or you can ask a specific question, and we will be ready to provide you information on criminal proceedings. An instance is that Khmelnytskyi region has opened criminal proceedings where one of the leaders goes under another additional article. We're using the influence of one of the leaders of the municipal company, and under the threat of demonstrations where they have a violent demand, let's say. I can't say how many subjects we have. And in the process of the pre-trial examination, there can be 1, 2, 3, and then 2, and 5, and 7, and 10 can appear. Every region, within the framework of its own criminal proceeding, has its own specific picture, more than 10, more than 20. I'm not ready to answer this question. I'm not equipped with this information. I don't, statistics are not a proof to me. The proof is whether we blocked specific work in a certain region. I said where you could get such statistics on the website of the security service. It's quite interesting. 26 criminal proceedings, criminal cases. Do you know that whether the courts made an accusation, accusatory resolution? Has somebody been imprisoned? Yeah, there are materials about the results of the pretrial examination. The materials are transferred to the court. I'd like to say that the competence of the service does not deal with consideration of a case in the court. Let's talk sincerely. These materials and this problem was raised by the state security service as a threat, and we are talking about the previous year, regardless of the fact that many things were said about 2011, 2013 and 12. We were concerned with the communities, and we saw we have been seeing the interrelation during the last previous year. In the nearest future, at least 2 district regions will take relevant court decisions. I think that they will appear before the end of this month. Maybe it's quite complicated to make statistics of such fake communities, but still, statistics of the communities are not difficult to maintain. We know what we are talking about. Can you name a figure? We have a figure: 413 territorial communities, united territorial communities are created in Ukraine. We are talking about different things. Can it happen that, like you said, in Ivano-Frankivsk region, 2 of them were registered? Among 413, maybe half of them were registered. They are quite different. If you allow, I'll give an answer. I have always been supporting the approach. We have to be competent about what we're talking about. We are talking about self-government bodies and public authorities. There's a keyword, authorities, but they are quite different according to their mechanism and structure, and we cannot say that they do the same. They all have their responsibilities. And also pseudo-territorial or fake communities. 2 or 3 people call themselves like the structure. They register like civil society organizations, and there's a registration of 2 types: via sending relevant documents to self-government bodies, statutes, and so on. And the second type of registration, this is an announcement of their existence. But we say that they are absolutely different subjects, and they cannot be among united territorial communities a priori. They are things of different nature. In one case, we have 2, 3, 5, 10 individuals who announce themselves. There's an emperor in Chernihiv, for example. There are 2 lands, like say the north and the south, as a congress of the root people of Ukraine. They created these communities, fake communities. We how many fake communities do you know? Leaders declare about several hundred. We can say about up to 100. And if you are interested in more specific information, we can stay after the event. I will name the resources you can look at. You can see them. You can use the names, and who uses this methodology. There's about 100 on every direction. On Cossack territorial communities, we can state the fact that there are some subjects registered that they have names as Cossack territorial communities, and there are about 200 of them, but each of them can exist simply on paper, or can exist virtually, or and can be realized in the form of specific demonstrations, like capturing municipal buildings either in Odessa or in Khmelnytsk. You understand that we should talk about a specific private case and a specific student or fake community, about specific circumstances. I want to ask you and your other colleagues, journalists, please don't mix up these 2 procedures. I said that that was created according to the legislation of Ukraine is legitimate. A territorial community created by subjects of private law cannot be a priori subjects of public law. There were 412 or 13 communities created in Ukraine according to the law Ukrainian voluntary unification of territorial communities. And this procedure continues. There is a process, specific an established order, and what is being created like fake, several people who name themselves people of the people of Ukraine and who can have a right to resolve things for the whole Ukraine is a practice opposing to the law. As far as I understand, the internet has very many various tools as to the creating these fake unifications. Do you understand it correctly? For example, the Ministry of Justice website, for example, has no one confirmed by the colleagues, or approved by the colleagues, one tool. There's an instruction how to create a legal community. You have mixed up all these things very strongly. It's impossible to create a legal territorial community. There some clarifications should be given, and you say, so a fake. Can we download the instruction how to create a fake community? I will say to you once more. Please read the Constitution, which says the territorial community exists by itself according to the law, and it doesn't need any additional procedures on its creation. For example, we can have a meeting and create a joint stock company, but we cannot make a self-government body. Dear colleagues, please excuse us. We have exhausted our time. In one meeting, in 1 minute, we'll have information by the spokesman of the Defense Ministry. This is like a nonsense where we have two quite different phenomena which are called by similar names, and it's very dangerous. And I agree with the colleague that we have a more proactive position of the state authorities, so they have to learn from people who can promote their ideas so strongly to make people understand correct ideas and to implement them into life. I would say that somebody of great people said an individual saying the truth is restricted to the truth, and people say a person saying telling lies is not restricted by anything.